Welcome. It's good to see you here for this special session that we've got. And I want to thank you for your attendance today. The topic for this session is almond hulls and shells for food uses. Assembled today is an excellent panel that will be presenting their novel approaches for the human consumption of almond hulls and shells and innovative ideas for products that could be used in the food service industry. The vision of the products that could be used and that are being explored by this working group is that someday, and the hope is that someday, a myriad of new products could be on the supermarket shelf that are made from almond hulls and shell. My name is Michael Kelley, and I am the President and CEO of Central California Almond Growers Association. The company I represent is an agricultural service cooperative that is located in Fresno County. We operate 4 hullers that process the seasonal production from 375 grower members who deliver their almond production from 62,637 acres for hulling and shelling services. This season, we shelled out just under 113 million pounds of meat equivalents. Once we finish our service, then our members' product is picked up by their packer where it is processed into finished product. In addition to the kernels, we also produce just under 113,000 tons of almond hulls and just over 36,000 tons of almond shells. Presently, almond hulls are sold exclusively to dairies that are used in their daily feed ration. Almond shell is primarily used at the dairy for bedding near the manger. This is certainly a large quantity of byproducts which we sell into the California dairy market. It is a daunting task to ship out the quantity of almond hulls we produce before the subsequent season occurs. The price we receive for our hulls is currently trading well below the cost of production and has been for several years. Additionally, the dairy industry has had many challenges due to low milk prices. They face incredible regulatory hurdles. Both issues of milk values and burdensome regulation have led to a herd size that has worked to put significant pressure on hull prices. As such, we on the Biomass Working Group desire to find value-added alternative uses for our hulls and shell byproducts that will benefit our members. I am honored to be the current chairman of the Almond Board of California's Biomass Working Group. Since its inception, this committee has engaged a great number of scientists and business people who have brought forward ideas that many of us found interesting, but often questioned whether they were practical and could be commercialized. However, some of these innovations, which our presenters will showcase today, are ones that we believe show great merit. This Biomass Working Group is where business meets science. We have become exceedingly appreciative of the ideas and potential for commercialization of products that can be used for human consumption using almond hulls. There are significant differences between almond kernels and almond hulls and shells. Almond kernels are a plant-based portable protein. Almond hulls are a carbohydrate, an antioxidant, and a good source of dietary fiber. Almond shells are a high source of fiber. These characteristic differences are important to point out, as we must be ever mindful in our pursuits of product that must not conflict with the good work of the Almond Board of California in finding new markets for almond kernels. We must be respectful of the work done to support California almond farmers in providing enhanced markets and products for almond meats. Therefore, our focus is to find new opportunities for almond hulls and shells that differentiate from the characteristics found in almond kernels. On behalf of all of us in the huller-sheller community, we wish to thank the Almond Board of California and Guangwei Wang for this working group that has shown great merit in finding other applications and uses for our byproducts. The Biomass Working Group of the Almond Board of California was formed in 2017 for the sole purpose of finding alternative uses for these products. Since its inception, the committee has looked at a myriad of ideas on new innovations that began at the formative stage of basic research. Some of these products have shown merit, and in some instances may have received research funding from the Almond Board of California to apply this research into a potential new product. Presently, the working group is at a point where some of these applications, as mentioned before, are showing merit. And our panelists will present to you today some good options that present themselves at this time. This will require additional cleaning methods to get the product in an edible and usable form in conformance with the Food Safety and Modernization Act. This is a subject which we will discuss this afternoon, and at this time, I wish to welcome our panel. Let me begin by introducing our first speaker. Dan Kurzrock is the founder and CEO of Upcycled Foods Incorporated, a pioneer of upcycled food movement. They created Regrain Super Grain Plus from Brewer's spent grain and helped establish the national upcycled certified standard for the past decade. Dan has led innovation across food loss and waste streams. His team is now applying for Upcycled Foods Lab expertise to a major opportunity for this industry, turning almond hulls into nutritious, scalable human food ingredients and applications. Next, we have Barb Stuckey. Barb has been at the innovation firm Matson for 28 years and is currently Chief New Product Strategy Officer. She leads Matson's thought leadership and marketing team, along with her own caseload of client innovation projects. She is the published author of Taste, Surprising Stories in Science About Why Food Tastes Good. I would like to turn it over to our first presenter, Dan.
Hi, good morning. Great to be with you. Kicking off the Almond Conference this year. It's a real pleasure. So, got a nice intro, so maybe need to do a little less as to who I am. But just to share a little bit about our company, I'm gonna introduce some of the big picture concepts that are behind this work. My goal is to spark some insights and inspiration around why action around this is so compelling and urgent. And then we're gonna, as the presentation panel goes on, we'll get a little bit more detailed and technical, and it'll all tie together nicely. My company, what we do is we take a look at overlooked and undervalued resources that are kind of being left off the table, so to speak, in the food system. And we do this through developing ingredient products and have brought some to market with that. I'll share a little bit about that, as well as partnering with organizations like the Almond Board of California to uncover new areas of innovation to then further advance that ingredient development side of what we're doing. And it's all very mission and purpose driven, but it's really fundamentally about good business sense, right? About turning waste into value, about getting, finding the crops that are within the crops, right? Multiple opportunities where that we maybe have once seen just one. So for me, this started, I was an underage home brewer. Has anyone made beer before? Yeah. Yeah, so it's a pretty simple process, even for a 19-year-old to figure out. But I was left with some big questions as to what to do with the grain that I was left with every time I made beer. It was about 1 pound for every 6-pack. And so that led to the creation of the Regrain Super Grain product line, which is a barley-based powder that starts with, as an input material, this byproduct stream from the brewing industry. So we sell a commercial food-grade powder that's used to fortify baked goods and snacks, and we've had national launches with retailers like Kroger, for example, who have incorporated this into baked goods like this bread that you see here. And there's a lot that I could go into here that's outside of the scope of this presentation, but I share this because we come at this as entrepreneurial operators ourselves that have taken action on an opportunity that we first saw, with our own experience with the commercial brewing industry, and that led to asking some bigger questions about what other opportunities are out there. And this is a single brewery in a single day, just to put into perspective, that scale. And almond hulls, of course, are you can see some similar photos. And what we did is we created a product that reframes this byproduct stream as a really valuable starting point for new product formulation that increases fiber, it increases protein, it reduces the water footprint, it reduces the carbon footprint. So it's all about unlocking the benefits of this more so than trying to tell consumers that they should be eating food waste or something like that. And our commercial partners, are basically seeing the opportunity around the intersection of their sustainability goals and some of the commitments that they made, but importantly, what the shoppers, the consumers, are looking for as items on the shelf. And so we're basically really excited to do the same with almond hulls, and this is what led to the partnership with the almond board, and we've got an active project going with Beam Circular, which is another really wonderful organization that's doing important work in advancing these types of solutions, and it's got enormous potential for the industry around new revenue streams, reducing disposal costs, aligning with what consumers are looking for. It's great storytelling. It makes sense across the spectrum, but importantly, this is not a new idea. This is not some crazy thing that the almond industry should think about doing before anyone else has. Upcycling and food waste reduction is a part of a larger movement right now. About 3/4 of the world's 250 biggest food companies have made global commitments around reducing food waste. They can actually live up to that commitment by developing products that use things like almond hull-based ingredients. And this is all happening in a context in which we are losing about 40% of all the food that we're producing in the U.S. And this is an issue that's top of mind for consumers. Barb is here from Mattson, who's done some wonderful research around consumer insights. And one of the things that they were the first to quantify is that nearly everybody wants to do their part to reduce food waste. And then Capgemini, another market research group, did some really interesting work around uncovering that many are actually actively disappointed that the brands and stores and supermarkets aren't doing, that they should be doing more, that they're not doing enough. This all creates a really ripe opportunity for customers of almond hull ingredient products. And this chart is probably potentially hard to see, but there's a little red box in the upper left there. The upcycled claim is one of the fastest growing claims in store right now as well, along with regenerative agriculture and some others. So this all really aligns with a lot of a confluence of pressures that are making now really the moment to put some of these great ideas into action. And the term that we use for that, at our company is around upcycling, which is really just common sense, but looking at it at a food system scale. So, if anyone who's a chef, and does, root to stem, using every part of the vegetable or every part of the animal, this is the same idea. And it's another term that you hear thrown around that this fits into is circularity, or the circular economy. And so I'm going to just keep moving in the interest of time here. It produces not just environmental benefit, but also financial benefit, and it can be quantified in different ways and reported out in a way that really strengthens the thought leadership of the almond industry and of specific players within. And so within our company, we do work helping organizations kind of meet that intersection of where the food science and the business case is, and the process for us is really around hopefully uncovering one of two main areas when we're looking at a new material opportunity. One is, where's there novel ingredients, new claims, new benefits that can be tapped into through upcycling practices, and another that is also really compelling is where better substitutes can be developed. So where can a alternative to cocoa powder, for example, be developed from food waste streams, or alternatives to coffee, some of these commodities that are really volatile in pricing and at risk, that ingredients like almond hulls can actually tap into through some innovation. So over the last, between the last conference and this one, we've been working directly with a powder of the almond hull ingredient that's been made at a pilot scale, and we've been integrating it into different types of products. And this is a really good representation of how we like to work. This is not this is not food waste. This is new opportunity. And when thinking about food waste, this is not like dumpster diving or uneaten food. And some people are familiar maybe with cosmetically imperfect produce or seconds, that have historically often gone into juicing or soups or uses like that. I mean, this is all important aspects of food system sustainability. But when we're looking at things like almond hulls, this is about byproduct streams, co-product streams that are actually maybe not measured as food, to begin with, but have massive potential to be unlocked as food. And again, not a new idea. Whey protein, right, comes from a side stream from cheese making and other types of dairy processing. Huge industry, right, around whey protein. You could argue that pickling and preserves are all kind of part of the same logic that goes behind why we should be developing innovations to preserve the quality and the benefits of foods. And this is, I just wanted to share some examples of what's happening across the industry. There's brands that are taking the pressings and the pomace, the pulp, from juice making, for example, and making high fiber chips. In the egg processing world, the membrane, that's actually inside the egg shell is a really rich source of collagen, for example, that's a really better alternative to bovine collagen in a lot of respects that has a really high margin opportunity particularly in like the supplements and nutraceutical space. And when you look at, crops like dates, for example, there's companies that are taking the pit from the date and actually making alternatives to coffee. In the wine industry, there's a couple streams that are being looked at and innovated around. One is surplus grapes, some from things like smoke tanning that make grapes not actually suitable for wine production, or other reasons for surplus. And then also the pomace from actually pressing the grapes. It actually makes for there's a company that's turned it into an ingredient that can be mixed into sauces that reduce sodium and reduce sugar and improve the flavor. And the surplus grapes that I mentioned before are being turned into raisins, like a new kind of crunchy superfood snack. Globally, crops like cashews, the cashew apple, probably no stranger to people in this room. A lot of times when I show this image, people have no idea what they're looking at, but there's a whole fruit, that's attached to the cashew crop. And there's a company that turned that into a plant-based meat alternative, for example. So this kind of innovation is happening, and it's really a ripe climate for almond hull innovation to tap into. We're seeing it with crops like cacao as well, both the husks and the fruit from the cacao. As well as in bananas. You see Green Banana Flour is a company that their whole cracker brand is based around green banana flour. You might think, oh, green bananas just turn into yellow bananas if you wait long enough, but actually at the point of harvest, there's actually a lot of waste that's generated through the banana processing. It's actually a big issue for that crop. And so the upcycled certified standard is something that we're now seeing on front of pack products. If you go into Costco today, there's multiple products you can find that are showing this upcycled certified seal on the front of the pack. And so there's also now tools for brands, for the customers of almond hull based ingredients to communicate what they're doing with these products and why it's different. So that all sounds great, but it turns out we do get a lot of questions, about upcycling, and so we decided to put together a little bit of a MythBuster section, which I don't have. I don't want to go too much over my allotted time here, but just wanted to kind of cover off on some of these, and maybe this will spark some of the questions that can come up later. But some, particularly on the customer end, there's a myth that upcycled ingredients can't scale reliably, which is just not true. Some of the reasons are listed here. I won't read every one. And myth number two around upcycled ingredients being less nutritious. In a lot of cases, these streams are actually more nutritious than some of the alternatives because of the concentration of fiber, for example, that can be tapped into. It's just not a part of the core initial crop. There's often safety concerns come up, because people are wondering, okay, so we're taking this from a waste stream, like, is this safe? And through just proper handling and processing, doing things like having kill steps and homogenizing the supply and all, there's SOPs that can be put in place to actually do this so that you can get through the FSQA requirements of a large-scale company. We've sold into multinational food companies with upcycled ingredients. Another myth is around formulation, that it can be challenging because these are new ingredients, and it's true. There is a learning curve, with some of these, because they're, especially for the novel ingredients that are not substitutes for something else that's already out there. But they have a lot of these materials. Almond hulls as an ingredient are actually pretty neutral in flavor and can go into a number of applications. Some upcycled ingredients have a stronger flavor that needs to be formulated around, and there's in practice, we find professional food product developers get really excited working with these new materials and some of the new flavors that they can tap into that they didn't otherwise have access to. And another one is around the upcycled claims and how that resonates at the consumer level. And just the bottom line is that this is something that is checking a lot of boxes for consumers, and importantly for the retail buyers that are setting up the allocation of what's actually going on shelf, as options for those consumers, which is what drives the CPG brands who would be the customers, right, for an almond hull-based ingredient. So when we're thinking about an outlook for the almond hull upcycling opportunity, one of the big questions that kind of guides us as an organization is thinking about business model innovation, not just product innovation, in a way that can reduce risk for the industry, for growers, for huller shellers, for other processors, and really drive an acceleration in the actual innovation work of putting this stuff into practice. And when we think about this, one of the kind of metaphors, visual metaphors that I like to bring up as an example is actually, does anyone know what this is? It's a growing method called the Three Sisters, where it's this ancient practice where corn and beans and squash are all grown together, each creating benefits for, the corn is providing the trellis for the beans, and the squash is providing ground cover, and also, of course, the nitrogen from the beans in the soil. And it's a system, of agriculture. And, I think we find this to be a really inspiring mindset when thinking about food innovation and the different roles that different players, can do in this. An organization, we really applaud the work that the Almond Board is doing in investing in advancing this in a pre-competitive sector level, system level way that's creating the opportunity for more players to come together to do this. Groups like Beam Circular, for example, that are based out of Modesto, they're setting up an innovation campus where pilot scale equipment can be located so that a processor doesn't need to jump straight to a large CapEx investment of putting in machinery before there's known demand, right? Like if we can work together as an ecosystem in developing markets for this, it can reduce the risk and increase the upside, for everyone. And so we're really thrilled to have the opportunity to play a part, in that for the almond industry, and really excited to pass off to Barb to talk a bit more about Mattson's work and for the rest of this panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dan. Barb, I'll turn it over to you. Dan came over from Oakland, and Barb came from San Francisco, so they didn't travel too far, but it's good to have both of you here.
Can I use this one? Yeah, I'm just going to use this one. Can I take it out? Okay, there we go. I can do it. I can see the screen better this way. The only challenge here is not to fall off. So you guys can catch me, right? Yeah, okay, good. All right.
I'm sorry, I left you on the wrong slide.
No worries. There we go. Okay, so I'm Barb Stuckey, and I've been at Mattson for 28 years. And if you haven't heard of us, I'll give you a little bit of background. We are based in Silicon Valley, and we do food and beverage innovation across all channels of trade, across all types of categories, across all kinds of cuisines, all types of food, drink, dietary supplements, you name it. So I'm giving you that because I'm going to be talking a lot about the panel that we worked with for this business case for almond hulls as a human food ingredient. And that panel is, we have 65 people in our Silicon Valley office, 35 of them are food scientists or commercialization specialists. So we didn't have to go very far to find a panel of people who could give us input on this particular challenge. And so the challenge is, as Mike said, hulls today are going to animal feed. And while animal feed is good, it's not quite as good as turning it into human food. There is higher value for turning it into human food. So that's what we are looking at. So we also have done, like Dan, we've done a number of projects where we were looking at the whole almond powder. Or sorry, the hull, not the whole, the hull powder. You can see on the top line here is some coffee powder. So for instant coffees, how much could we replace with almond hull powder? And then we did some bread, we did some bars. And so what we're looking at today is the strategic and economic opportunity here. Not exactly, what kind of food and beverage can we make? We've done a little bit of that work. Dan's doing some of that work. But what kind of results can we get from figuring out how to monetize the almond hull? So we first started by looking at what are the constituents of almond hulls. Like Mike said, the kernel is mostly protein, has a little bit of fat. And what we found was that in almond hulls, you have three main components. The first is dietary fibers, which we all know are very healthy for us. And I don't know, I bet you've heard about this, but recently there's been this just craze where everybody wants to put more protein in their products. Well, we think that is going to eventually start to come down and not be as prevalent. But what we think is on the upswing is fiber supplementation. So the fact that almond hulls have fiber, dietary fiber in them, is really important. We also found that, as Mike said, there's carbohydrates in the hull. They show up in the form of sugar, so we're going to take that into consideration. And then lastly but not least is polyphenols. And if you've not heard the word polyphenols, it is very simply antioxidants. So you've probably heard about antioxidants being good for you, like dark chocolate, which is high in antioxidants. You've got bright red fruits like pomegranate, which are high in antioxidants. Those are all polyphenols. And polyphenols have a very high value on the market for industrial ingredients. And now what I want to talk to you about just quickly before I get into the statistics is why we like to separate ingredients. Do we have any bakers out there? Home bakers, whatever. Yeah, people that like to, only one person that likes to bake? Okay. All right. Well, if you think about baking, you can get two different kinds of butter, right? You can get unsalted butter or you can get salted butter. And when you are a commercial baker, what you will typically want is unsalted butter. Why? Because then you can put as much butter in or as little butter as you want without having to worry about your dough or your batter or whatever getting too salty. And that is the case with pretty much every ingredient that every food scientist use. They like to think of it as having more levers to pull by having single ingredients. So that's going to be important in a minute. So what we looked at is where can these ingredients play? And we looked at, of course, the benefits and then some of the drawbacks of using almond hulls. With hulls, you get kind of I think Dan was saying it, it's like, a pretty nice, gentle flavor. It's a little bit fruity. It can taste a little roasty. All of those are good things. They are naturally brown, sometimes a little hard to work with, but in certain applications, brown is good. They are upcycled, and of course, they're US grown. So all great things that we want to take advantage of. The things that are limitations are that the flavor and color just aren't entirely neutral, and there's potential for grit because they are very, fibrous, and they're not specialized. And by not specialized, this is what I mean when I'm talking about those two different kinds of butter that you can get. So we are now changing from the work that has been done by Mattson and Dan with the whole, sorry, this is hard to say, whole powder, and we are now moving into constituents thereof. So, we came up with 2 ideas. Now, remember that we said that the highest value ingredient was the polyphenols. So we came up with the idea of taking that carbohydrate and turning it into not just a sugar syrup, but a polyphenol-rich sugar syrup. What do we use syrup for in the industry? Well, a lot of things that you probably enjoy. So something like a Cliff Bar usually uses a syrup for both sweetness as well as binding. You could put it in granola, and it sticks to the oats, and it kind of makes it sweet, and it binds it together. So that was one of the things that we looked at, is what kind of ingredient or what kind of categories would this almond hull syrup be able to play in. Then we looked at what people are using today. And again, we went to our food scientist and said, okay, in terms of carbohydrate syrups, what do you use? Well, we use honey, we use maple, we use tapioca, date syrup, agave syrup, and brown rice syrup. And the reason that we decided that we were going to focus on brown rice syrup is that it is one of the largest in terms of volume usage in the industry. So we focused on brown rice syrup as a competitor to, or a comparable to, the almond hull syrup that we're talking about. So I will call that a comp. Same thing with fiber. We went to our food scientists and said, okay, of all the fibers that you've been fortifying things with, which ones are most popular, which ones get used at higher rates? And we came up with oat fiber as a good comp for almond hull fiber. Now remember, this is not the whole hull fiber, but this is the isolated fiber, which we are now connecting with polyphenols. So it is a polyphenol-rich fiber. So now we've got these ideas for 2 different ingredients. And we looked at this 3 different ways. The first way we did was to look at ingredient swaps, where you could take almond hull syrup and replace brown rice syrup. On the other hand, we looked at what percentage of the bar category, like the Cliff Bar category, what percentage could we replace with almond hull syrup or almond hull fiber. We looked at a low case using some conservative assumptions, and we looked at a high case using some more aggressive assumptions so that we could come up with a number that we could, well, you know, all of these things are somewhat estimated because we don't actually have almond hull fiber or almond hull syrup yet, but we are getting there. So the way that we did this was, and when I say we, I mean my colleague, who is really amazing at crunching numbers. She bought some data. This is syndicated data that you can get on the market. And we looked at different category sizes, whether the categories were growing or not. We looked at ingredient sales data to find out that brown rice syrup was the most prevalent used one, and that oat fiber was also a most prevalent used fiber supplement. So then we made some assumptions, and we came up with, again, our high estimate, our low estimate, and I will talk about one other thing that we know is going to be a decision that somebody has to make, and it could be a decision made by the Almond Board of California, could be a decision made by growers, could be a decision made by the people that are helping Mike and the team to try to, you know, take the hulls away. So we looked at different price points, and the decision is that we can make a decision to prioritize using the hulls, like trying to get something in place that allows us to use all of the almond hulls by using this fiber syrup or using the polyphenol syrup or the fiber. So we also then looked at another scenario, which was, let's prioritize not getting rid of all the hulls and taking them away, because as we know, they're not cheap to have hauled away, not easy either, because they're really light, like butterflies in the air. So what if we prioritized profit? And that goes back to our numbers, looking at category sizes, looking at what percentage of the fiber or percentage of the syrup would go into each food or beverage application. And here's what we came up with. So if we decide to maximize for tonnage, so the pure just volume of hulls that are out there and created every day, if maximized for tonnage, and again, this is going to be on a 5-year basis, so in 5 years, we think that we can remove 1.7 million tons by going with a lower priced fiber and syrup. So that's focusing on just getting the hulls optimized, utilized, monetized. If we maximize for profit, however, we can, in 5 years, that's our estimate, is that we can perhaps see $4.3 billion. Those $1 billion are coming through the sales of the almond hull fiber and sales of the almond hull syrup. And these are going to be in food and beverage applications sold for human consumption. So the last thing, oops, I'm going to go back because I skipped over one. But remember I was talking about, separating the constituents for food formulation, and that's what most food scientists want to do. We also came up with, by talking to our commercialization team, a process for removing or separating out from the whole hulls just the syrup and just the fiber. So we have not validated this process yet, but if the ABC wants to help fund it, we could do some trials just to make sure that the syrup and the fiber actually do what we think they're going to do in a food or beverage application. And so our next steps are to validate the operations flow at a pilot scale, which we can't do at Matson, so we would have to go to some sort of supplier or co-packer to do that. We would need to conduct food safety and quality testing. We would need to think about things like pesticide and allergenicity. And then we want to make sure we're going to test the polyphenol levels, because it's not that we're worried about the hulls not having polyphenols. We're worried about them having too many polyphenols, because the dose is the poison, right, for pretty much everything. So we want to make sure there's a safe amount of polyphenols. And then, of course, we're looking for GRAS approval. That's generally recognized as safe, approval for use in human food. And from that, where we've been doing all of this application work on whole hull powder, then we would move to be doing application work with just the fiber and just the sugar syrup, both of them high in polyphenols. And I can't believe I'm this close to stopping at the right time. This never happens to me. I could talk for 20 more minutes, but I think I am out of time. So those are our estimates for the economic impact that we could have if we bring these two industrial ingredients to life.
Our next speaker is Mark Soberman. And Mark is also with the Beulah Group. So thank you so much, Mark. Mark, where are you traveling from?
Austria.
Austria, yes.
Yes.
So you came the farthest. Okay, you win the award.
9 time zones. Yeah. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks. So I'm really excited to be here. It's my first time at the Almond Conference. And I'd, of course, like to thank Wang Wei for the invitation, and also William, who was instrumental in making sure that I was here today. Yeah, I'll be telling you about compostable packaging made from upcycled almond shells. I know the industry regards this as a massive waste stream, and we're going to spend the next 15 minutes talking about how to transform this waste stream into a new revenue stream. You can see there the image is what the tray looks like when it was put in the garden after 10 days of rain. So not only compostable packaging, but actually the most compostable packaging, in addition to using upcycled side stream material. So the sustainability benefits are there, and the revenue stream is there. You've got the raw material. So let's find out how we can make this happen. The big question being that I'm aiming to answer today: how can we create value from California's almost 1 million tons of almond shell waste? Yeah, so this slide is probably already familiar to you from Will's presentation. We've got the high-value food products there on the left. And with our new processing technology, which I've worked on developing with our business unit in Austria, we've got shape bake. And the idea here is that we're processing 2 kilos of shells for every 3 kilos of kernels, which is an enormous amount of value left on the table, if you think about it. And why packaging? So that's a very good question. But if you think about it, packaging, I mean, the shell itself is nothing more than nature's packaging for the kernel. So it makes a lot of sense to repurpose that packaging, grind it up, and turn it into a useful food service product that replaces and eliminates single-use plastics from the market. From the perspective of consumer behavior around compostable packaging, this is something that around the world and in all use areas, consumers are willing to pay more for packaging that they regard as being sustainable. And in the top right of that image, there you see that compostable packaging and plant-based packaging are the types of packaging that are regarded as the most sustainable on the market. In addition to that, there's a significant growth rate. So 2025 right now, we're at a $2 billion compostable food service packaging market that will reach $5 billion by 2030. So a huge growth rate, and it's an opportunity to kind of get on board with our raw material stream here in this industry and help address this market, growing market, obviously. The shape bake technology itself is a versatile technology. It was not developed for the almond industry. It was developed for side streams in general. When we were talking about that 1 billion tons of side streams, that's just 1 billion tons of side streams produced on machinery from Buehler Group. So we calculated how many tons of side streams are coming off all of our equipment, and we came to the number over 1 billion. And then we started exploring, okay, what kinds of side streams can we valorize with this technology to turn it into packaging? And today we'll be talking about almond shells. We recently discovered we could also even use sawdust. So lots of possibilities out there, as well opportunities to combine different waste streams. So if you think of almond shells and pistachio shells, here in the Central Valley, I mean, everything is so close together. There's great opportunity to use one industry and the other industry together to create maybe the first pilot plant to take this to market. In terms of the end product possibilities, so we've done a lot of research and developed a lot of molds. We're actually the business unit from food processing technology, specifically wafer, and we have a way to basically mold different shapes into different baking plates, and so cutlery and trays. Cutlery is a very interesting one. We actually have sold 2 shape bake lines. One is already in production, and there's a third one about to be ordered by a French customer that makes edible forks for ready-to-go salads in grocery stores. But in this case, they are 100% on the edible side. And we believe that the potential for side stream valorization is far greater than that, because an edible fork, I mean, you know, you think about it, and I wouldn't say this outside of this room, but it is a bit of a gimmick. Whereas compostable material that, you know, not everyone wants to eat their fork after they eat their salad, but it does make a lot of sense to want to throw it out and know that it's not going to harm the environment. So on that point, I think the valorization of the side stream is really where we see the most potential growth over the next few years. This is a number of different shapes that we've developed. And today we have got to a 30% almond shell content in the tray. We've got 55% on pistachio shell, and we believe that there's opportunity here to pursue further research to see what are the factors influencing that 30% and how do we bring that to 55, 60, maybe even 70%, which is what was achieved recently with sawdust. Again, the material has to be fibrous and contain a little bit of starch, and that is perfect when we're talking about shells. Quick point about the rest of the materials that are used. We've got wood fiber, sustainable wood fiber, and cornstarch. The fiber source and the starch source are interchangeable, so you can switch to bamboo, or you can switch to potato starch, or even wheat flour. Whatever raw material is most available in the region and available at the lowest cost, that's what makes sense to incorporate in the formula. And our R&D center back in Austria can help support you to get to exactly the kind of formulation where you've optimized for your costs and for the end consumer's product specifications and requirements. Here is the line at the French customer in France with the 8 forks per baking plate. The only point here is to just show that it works. So that's the robot taking the forks out of the molds. Here you see the dough portioning in feed. And there was the robot at the end. This dough, again, is wheat flour and wheat fiber, so no byproducts in that because it's meant for human consumption. From the perspective of process, so at Bühler, we've got tons of processing equipment. This is about as simple as it gets, actually. You just mix the dough. You first mix the dry ingredients together, then you add the water, which basically turns it into a solid dough. You portion the dough using a dough portioning unit. Then a robot places the dough portion from the conveyor belt into the mold. The molds close and they move through the baking plate, being heated to 200 degrees Celsius for 3.5 to 4 minutes, which constitutes a definitive kill step on the material. And then at the end, the baking plates open back up, and you have the robot that takes it off and sends it towards stacking. One point that is not mentioned here is that there's also a grinding step, but that is dependent on the raw material in question, and therefore it's defined according to the given use case and the given side stream that we're talking about. And that's an example of a flat wafer baking plate, just to show you that other part of the tongue. Looking at a layout, so this is, the French customer has a 96 plate oven. The largest oven that we've envisioned is about 200 baking plates, which can do about 3,000 to 3,500 pieces per hour on the trays, and 8 times that on the cutlery. Because of course you've got 8 products per plate, so that's the calculation there. Very quickly, I wanted to show you a few products that we've worked on and where they might be used. So if you look at the professional sports stadiums, this is kind of the perfect environment to promote this kind of packaging because its inherent moisture resistance is actually not that great. If you want to use it for longer term food packaging, you have to coat it or laminate it or use a food grade shellac. I mean, there's all sorts of ways that we've explored. But as a starting point and on its most basic level, it can be used for quick food service packaging applications. And so we thought, there's 171 million people attending professional sports events in America alone every year. Why not maybe tap 1% of that market? That's 1.7 million pieces. 10% of that market, 17 million pieces. That can be produced on a Shape Bake 200 running 24 hours a day, 300 days a year. You can capture 10% of the professional sports leagues. So when we're talking about the scale of the technology and how it matches to the end user market and also to the raw material supply, it can make a lot of sense. Each Shape Bake line is basically 12 football fields worth of waste avoided each year. It's a kind of random statistic, but it definitely makes a lot of sense when you think about the scale and the impact that this technology can have. Another big thing coming up in California pretty soon are the Los Angeles 2028 Olympic Games. Being able to showcase or use California almonds to promote sustainability around the use of side streams and sustainable packaging at an event like this, I think it can have huge benefits from a sustainability, publicity, and of course revenue perspective as well, because usually venues like this are willing to pay a little bit more than the market rate for premium products that actually have a message and a story behind them as well. Another huge opportunity are theme parks with existing waste infrastructure and music festivals and other outdoor events. California, of course, is rife with them. We're thinking about Disney, Universal, as well as music festivals like Coachella, awesome places to use food service packaging, rapidly decomposing, and for use rapidly. And lastly, I just want to point out here the difference that this packaging can make. It can make a difference to the end user because they're using a product that makes them feel good about what they're using. It makes a difference to your bottom line. You're taking out of the 3 kilos of kernels, you're getting 2 kilos of the shells and using those and making some profit off of that. For the industry's reputation, that's another point, right? There's concerns around resource-intensive irrigation, and if you can show that you're basically creating an entire other product stream from that water use, it can mitigate a lot of those concerns around that. And lastly, of course, for the environment, every compostable packaging item produced on this line replaces another single-use packaging item made of plastic, which, of course, if anyone's gone to a beach recently, we'd all like to see less plastic polluting them, for sure. Getting to the end here and still within time, so quite happy about that. I do speak fast. But yeah, so after 10 days biodegrading in the garden, this was the result. And right there, that's actually slugs. So instead of polluting nature and harming ecosystems, we're actually providing them with food that they would otherwise have. I mean, starch, shell in the soil, that can also feed a slug, and we're just repurposing that, giving it a second life, and then returning it to nature. So if that's not the circular economy, I don't know what is. And yeah, that's the idea here. Biodegradable plant-based packaging, transforming your waste stream into value. So yeah, as next step, let's think about what products might be best suited to what shape.
I want to thank everybody. They're spot on. You actually had 2 minutes left, so you went, once again, you win the prize.
Oh, yeah, you should
Oh, yeah.
I forgot, I was so into it. Yes.
You had 2 minutes.
Good. Yeah, these are some of the samples that we've created. So you can come and visit us at our booth in Bueller Group. What, do you know the number? Okay. We're in the hall. And yeah, so different percentages of the 26%, all the way down to 11%. I mean, when I was talking about the specs of the product, you know, a customer might look at this and say, yeah, that's a bit heavy, and I don't know if I want this color, but you can just reduce the byproduct content and make something that's more appealing.
Are those the edible ones?
These are the edible ones, exactly. So we've got forks and spoons here that you could make edible. I mean, we could also maybe use the almond hull fiber to make edible almond hull forks. All sorts of ideas are possible from this. But yeah, if you want to come and see us, learn more about the samples that we've prepared, and talk to us about this technology, we'll be for the next 3 days down at the booth in the hall. So thank you.
Now we're going to open up for some questions.
Dedicated time for audience questions. Submit a question specific to this session, and the QR code displayed on the screen. Q&A moderator will review submissions and, as time allows, announce questions for the moderator and speakers to address.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I've been in an analog world. That's not always but wondering how this corresponds with food allergen. If somebody has an almond allergy and then they're like at the ballpark and maybe it's not on a fat fork, does the shell not have allergens like the kernel does?
So our understanding was that the allergenic proteins are found in the kernel. Now, there may be some cross-contamination, and it can end up in the shell stream, but our understanding of it, and we've spoken to experts in this field, we haven't actually performed the testing, and of course, before going to market, you would need to do that allergenicity test for sure. But our understanding is that if you take that, even if there's some kernel in the shell, and then it undergoes that treatment at 200 degrees Celsius for 3.5 to 4 minutes, that normally would denature the allergenic proteins and render the product non-allergenic. But it's a very good question, and that does have to be confirmed with testing of the final product. Thank you.
Okay. I sure want to thank all of our presenters. I think everybody did a wonderful job, and I'm excited for the future. I've been on the committee, as I mentioned, since 2017, and all of your presentations were just spot on. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let's give them a round of applause.